So, this morning I want to talk about a term we often don't hear associated with Buddhism, and the term is redemption. It's a term usually associated with theistic traditions like Christianity or Judaism, and it's defined as the act of being delivered from sin or being saved from evil. And I grew up with a minister father, so I heard the term a lot. But I was surprised a little while ago, some weeks ago, when I heard it used in a Buddhist context. So I decided to look into it a little bit and got kind of intrigued. And so I want to share some thoughts with you about it this morning. What struck me was that in Buddhism, the concept of redemption is not framed the same way as in most other religious traditions. Unlike systems that emphasize the forgiveness of sin by an external deity or salvation granted through divine grace, in Buddhism, we don't outsource our redemption. We see it as an internal process of awakening, of transformation, of liberation. So it's not about seeking absolution outside of ourselves from some outside institution or deity. It's about taking personal responsibility for our own actions and therefore for what we're going to call our own redemption. And recognizing in this our own capacity for change and how we can walk this path toward reducing our own suffering. Now, at the core of this whole idea is the understanding that we talk about here almost every week, which is that suffering is an inherent part of our existence, but that most of our suffering is not imposed upon us arbitrarily from some outside source from which we have to ask for forgiveness or redemption, but rather from our own attachments, from our own ignorance and seeing things unclearly, and our own unskillful actions. So therefore, in Buddhism, redemption is not about appeasing a higher power. It's instead about addressing the root causes of our own suffering and taking deliberate steps, deliberate action to cultivate wisdom, compassion, and mindfulness. And of course, the first step in doing this is recognizing and embracing the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths that serve as the foundation for understanding the nature of suffering and the freedom from suffering. As you will recall briefly, the first noble truth acknowledges the reality of suffering. The second identifies its causes as attachment and craving. The third noble truth points to the cessation of suffering. And the fourth noble truth outlines the Eightfold Path, which is really the roadmap, the practical guide for transformation. So within this framework, redemption, as we're talking about it this morning, begins when we take responsibility for our own suffering. Instead of blaming external circumstances, blaming others, we must look inward and examine how our thoughts, our words, and our actions contribute to these cycles of pain in our lives. And we do this, and we seek this self-awareness not to induce guilt or shame or self-recrimination, but to foster a sense of empowerment, to really see that this lies within us to do something about. If suffering arises from our own behavior, we then hold the power to change it. And one of the most practical aspects of redemption in Buddhism is its emphasis on ethical conduct. It's foundational. The Eightfold Path comes in three buckets, three baskets, and one of them are the ethical principles. And those are, as you will recall, right speech, right action, and right livelihood. And these three of the Eightfold Path guide us toward living in a way that minimizes harm to ourselves and others and fosters positive connection with others that we talked about the other day. So redemption in this sense is about making amends, not engaging in external rituals. By actively choosing to live a more skillful, compassionate, and mindful life. For example, if I've caused harm to someone through harsh words or thoughtless actions, the Buddhist approach to redemption in that sense would involve acknowledging my wrongdoing, making an effort to repair the damage, and committing to more skillful behavior in the future. That really sums it up. The process is not about seeking forgiveness for its own sake or looking outside of ourselves for it. It's about cultivating the qualities of humility, accountability, and kindness that lead to inner peace and harmony with others. Then, of course, we have meditation as another essential tool. By practicing mindfulness, by practicing loving kindness meditation, we develop and cultivate the ability to observe our thoughts, our emotions, and our habits without judgment. And this awareness allows us to identify those patterns of greed, of anger, of delusion, all the three poisons that perpetuate our suffering and gradually help us and lead us toward letting go of them. Loving kindness meditation in particular is a powerful practice for cultivating forgiveness and compassion, both for ourselves and for others. Because by sending wishes of happiness, health, and peace to all beings, we cultivate these qualities, including those we may have harmed or who have harmed us. We begin to break down barriers of resentment. We break down barriers of self-judgment that keep us trapped in cycles of suffering. So our practice reminds us that redemption is not just about transforming our relationship with ourselves, but also about healing our relationships with others. We talk again and again here about the concept of impermanence, which holds that all things, and that includes our thoughts, emotions, and actions, are in a constant state of flux. And I find this principle deeply liberating when it comes to this idea of redemption. No matter how many mistakes I've made or how entrenched my habits have been, the Buddhist path teaches that change is always possible. We are not bound, nor are we prisoners of our past actions. With effort and mindfulness, we create new patterns of thought and behavior that lead to greater freedom and happiness. That's the whole reason we're on this path. This perspective stands in stark contrast to the idea of eternal damnation, original sin, unchangeable consequences, hellfire and brimstone, and all of that. Because on the Buddhist path, karma is not a system of retributive justice. It's the natural law of cause and effect. While our past actions may influence our present circumstances, we always have the ability to plant new seeds through our skillful actions that bear positive fruit in the future. Redemption, therefore, is not about realizing this potential for change it is about realizing this potential for change and actively working to align our lives with these principles of wisdom and compassion. And then we have forgiveness as another vital component of redemption in Buddhism. But in this context, forgiveness is not about condoning harmful behavior or absolving others of their responsibility. It's about freeing ourselves from the burden of anger, resentment, and hatred that exists when we don't forgive, that can poison our hearts and minds. As we've talked about in the past, when we forgive others, whether we tell them or not, we release the grip of negative emotions that keep us stuck in suffering. And this allows us to move forward with greater clarity and peace. And involved in this, of course, is the practice of self-forgiveness. Self-compassion and self-forgiveness in Buddhism is essential for transformation. So rather than dwelling on our mistakes or berating ourselves for our shortcomings, we approach our imperfections, and we all have them, with kindness and understanding and self-forgiveness. We acknowledge our humanity and we commit to learning from our experiences. And by doing that, we create the conditions for genuine redemption and growth. Ultimately, the Buddhist concept of redemption is about liberation. It's about freedom. Freedom from the cycles of craving, the cycles of aversion and ignorance that bind us to suffering. It's not granted by some external authority. We don't need a priest or a rabbi or some other authority to grant us absolution. It is realized through our own efforts and insights. You know, one of the things I love about this path is it puts the responsibility on us. It doesn't outsource it, as I said. The Buddha taught that each of us has the potential for awakening and change, and that redemption lies in our ability to recognize and actualize this potential. It's not an easy journey, and it requires patience, perseverance, and courage. But the path offers a wealth of practical tools and teachings to guide us along the way. It offers us Sangha and community to help us come together and figure this stuff out. It offers us ethical precepts. It offers us meditation practices, all come under the umbrella of the wisdom of the Dharma. By walking this path, by walking it together as a Sangha, we can redeem ourselves, not by seeking forgiveness from some outside authority and absolution, but by transforming our hearts and minds, awakening to the truth of our interconnectedness with each other. So in Buddhism, redemption's not a single event. It's not going to confession and being forgiven and all that. It's not an external gift. It's an ongoing process of self-discovery, transformation, and liberation. It's about taking responsibility for our actions, cultivating mindfulness and compassion, and aligning our lives with the principles and teachings of the Dharma. When we embrace this path, we free ourselves from the chains of suffering. We heal our relationship with others, and most of all, we uncover the boundless potential for wisdom and peace that is the birthright of each of us. In this way, redemption becomes not just a personal journey, but a pathway to contributing to the happiness and well-being of all beings. So that is redemption through a Buddhist lens.